Hey everybody, welcome to our 50th episode of Mac Outdoors with Mia and Lea. You are going to want to stay tuned because we are going to share with you the awesome elk hunt that my mom went on this year. Stay tuned.
This summer, whether you're at the range or in the field, WSI Sports' Hypertech bamboo tanks, tees, and leggings will have you covered. Visit WSISports.com and use Leah's affiliate code LLCO10 for 10% off your purchase. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI is bringing back pride in American-made clothing. Again, that code is LLCO10 for 10% off your order at WSISports.com.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in this week. It's our 50th episode, and what a great topic we'll be sharing today. We have mentioned that my mom went on an awesome archery elk hunt and was successful. If you have followed us on social media, you have seen the pictures. And today we're going to be sharing the story. So, to lead up to the big harvest, today we're going to share all of the details of the lead up. How many days were you out pursuing elk?
So, during this hunt, it coincided with the regular archery season in Colorado, which is about a month long. It starts the end of August and it ends almost the last weekend of September. We actually hunted a total of 18 days. We packed our camp in and out 3 separate times. And it was a lot of hunting and it was a lot of fun.
That is a very long time. What was your favorite part about being out there so long?
Actually, my favorite part really of any hunt is just being out there and being close to the wildlife. You kind of become connected with the animals and nature, so to speak, which is part of the favorite thing that I like about hunting is just being out there and seeing new things. Where I hunted is actually a limited draw area, so it's a place where you have to apply, and I had applied for 6 or 7 years before I actually drew this tag. So it's not a spot that I already knew. And part of the fun was learning the area and experiencing new hunting techniques that we haven't been able to use on our side of the mountain.
And so you said it was a limited draw unit, and I've heard these stories before, but can you describe the area and the elk and just how the ecosystem is so different there than where we usually hunt in a regular season?
Absolutely, because something that a lot of people who hunt the public land if you're hunting public land and it's a over-the-counter tag, you actually see a lot more hunters. You run into a lot of people. While we were up there, we never saw another hunter, even when muzzleload season overlapped archery season. So that was one thing that was different. As far as the terrain is very similar to areas that you and I have hunted. There were a lot of steep hills, a lot of, intense climbs or descents. I mean, you got to go up and down those mountains. So that is one thing. There was a ton of beetle kill over there. So there was a lot of climbing and maneuvering over logs and stuff like that. But the big difference was those elk on that side, they haven't had the pressure from those over-the-counter hunters that are just out there at, their free will running around. And I don't want to say harassing elk because I don't think hunters really harass elk, but when there's a lot of them, they tend to push harder, and the elk change their rut patterns, they change their habits, and hunting them is a lot different when they have a lot of pressure. So it was really cool to be on the side of the mountain where those elk sometimes were even curious, and they were wanting to see what was there instead of running and hiding from every small noise they heard.
That's really interesting. I know a lot of elk usually run away, but to have them come to you is kind of funny, I think. What were some of your highlights of encounters with elk besides, of course, harvesting years, but some that you came in close calls with and stuff like that?
Close calls was a big thing because on our side of the mountain, as you know, you may not get to see a legal elk during archery season. I mean, we have a 4-point restriction, so the elk have to have 4 points on one side in order for them to be legal to shoot. And sometimes if you see a legal elk on this public land side, you're going to try to take a shot. And over there, we actually had a lot of time to be selective, which was really, I guess you could say, it was stressful for me because I'm so used to just trying to get set up and ready for a good shot, an ethical shot. And on that side, I actually learned how to be super patient. I learned how to be selective. And through all of that, regardless of whether I had ever shot an elk during that season, I got so close to so many different bulls that it was amazing. One of the elk that we got close to during a rainstorm, we were making 1,000-foot climb back up toward camp, and it was pouring down rain, and we were drenched. And of course, at that point, we're just trying to do all we could to spare our energy to get to the top of the mountain. And we kind of stopped for a little break, and Hank leaned over and he touched this log, and it was rotted, and it broke off and crashed. And just like 25 yards in front of us, a bull started screaming, bugling, and that sound of that crashing just excited him. And so we snuck up to him. He was raking a tree, and he was one that I probably could have arrowed. It was probably a 260 or 270 class bull, which, you know, we have one of those on the wall in the house. But over there, we actually were looking for something a little larger.
I can't imagine the suspense to even hear an elk coming in or stocking up on an elk. Were there times where you just wanted to harvest one, or were you really pushing for the major 300, high 300s class bulls?
So this was something where I had to have faith and rely on Hank. And had you been there, I would have been relying on you because you're very good at being patient and selective. But the very first morning that we were there, we stalked up within 30 yards of this huge bull. He was bedded down. He stood up and he turned broadside. And he was a 5x5 that probably scored 320. His eye guards were about 2 foot long, and he was just amazing. You could tell he was a super old, mature bull that actually was probably already going downhill, like he probably was larger in years past. That was perfect conditions to shoot an arrow at him. And Hank looked at me and I looked at Hank, and Hank shook his head no. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because any other time, this would have been an elk that I would have definitely taken a shot at. And Hank said no. And I kind of controlled myself. And I was like, it is the first morning. We do have a whole month. You've got time. Don't get anxious. That kind of scenario happened at least 3 to 5 times every morning that we were up there hunting. And sometimes we'd sneak in and the bull would just be a little raghorn, maybe a spike, maybe a small 4x4. But we were definitely within bow range of, 3 to 5 elk every day. So it was pretty tough. And I, at first, wasn't sure what I was holding out for. Part of me was like, let's see what we see because we have time. And then as time went on and we came back and forth, I started seeing bigger and bigger bulls. And once I started seeing the larger bulls, then I realized what we were holding out for. But I still had the anxiety of, oh my gosh, I'm archery hunting. And what if I don't ever get to shoot one? So it was pretty stressful.
So with the emotions, I know there had to have been excitement. And as you were saying, I know you had a lot of adrenaline. Can you describe how some of this emotion might be different from a regular season hunt?
Yeah. So the emotion, with any hunt, you have the ups and downs of the actual hunt and the endurance and the energy that you need. You have to keep your strength. You have to keep your balance. You have to be quiet during your stalk, or maybe you have to be noisy in your stalk and act like you're another bull making noise, or maybe you need to move quickly to play the wind. There's always that. But with this, knowing that there were so many elk there, the pressure of having a limited tag that took years to draw, it was a little different because I'm like, this took years to draw. So I kind of want to fill the tag. And not that it's a once in a lifetime tag, but it would take a lot of time to draw again. And really, it just felt like the pressure to not leave there empty-handed was part of the anxiety, where on a normal archery season with an over-the-counter tag, I've always kind of just said, oh, well, if I don't fill it, then Hank has a rifle tag, or when you were here, Leah has a tag, we'll get meat some other way, where I felt like this time it was on me.
Yeah, and I feel like that would be really challenging to want to harvest one so badly. And I know we've heard some friends who weren't successful, and I think that would be really challenging to have to wait so long and, knowing how the hunt is over there versus where our public land hunting is.
Right. And that was one thing, was another sense of anxiety was like, holy cow, I have all these elk all around me. What if I don't come through and do my job? And what if I don't make a good shot? Or what if I can't draw without being busted? Or there were all these thoughts went through my head. Actually, there was one bull that I saw him a total of 3 times. The first time I tried to get to him, when you're elk hunting, you have to play the wind. And the wind was going up valley, and he was a level above me. So Hank set up to call. He's moving around. I'm trying to get in position. I could tell that this big bugling bull, he was massive. He's much larger than the bull I ended up with, longer main beams and a ton of mass. But I could tell he was trying to maneuver so that he could smell me and see who I was. And so I was running uphill and jumping over the beetle kill and trying not to break my bow or my sight or fall down. And he caught me before. He caught wind, and then he saw me, and I saw him, and he just turned and went away. So then another hunt a week later, an elk is raking a tree, and the wind was perfect. And as I started to stalk up to this elk raking the tree, I could tell it was him. And I knew because of these main beams that he had. I was like, that is him. So I spent all this time. I played the wind. I snuck in close. I got to within 15 yards, but the tree was between us. And I waited and waited till I could move so I could get in position for a shot. And then the wind swirled and changed, and boom, he was gone just like that in a blink of an eye. He disappeared into the dark timber. And so those ups and downs, I mean, that happens on any side of the mountain and elk hunting, but that's part of what you deal with. And what makes it so fun is trying to get there. And then, like I said, now I have to do my part and get in position and make a good shot. So it was a lot of pressure and still a ton of fun.
It sounds like it was so fun. So I know you've had a lot of encounters with bulls on this hunt, but did you have any crazy cows or really young bull encounters that were hilarious or just super fun to interact with them?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. I had several encounters with cows. When we were trying to call a big bull in one time, and we called in several cows, and they would see us and they'd circle back and run away and trot back to the herd. And then we also had one day we were hunting, and it was a real off day. It was real silent and quiet, and we weren't hearing a lot of bugles that day. And we're sneaking through the woods. I actually saw some really nice timberline bucks that day, and we're sneaking through, trying to play the wind. The wind is in our face, blowing behind us. And then suddenly we heard like twigs break behind us, and we froze. We're like, what? And we turn around and look, and there's this little 6x6, about 30 yards downwind of us. He should smell us. He should not be there by all hunting logic. And so this elk is there. So we just froze. We waited, and he kind of meandered away. He had 2 cows with him, and he headed off to the left with them and out of sight. And so we proceeded. He was not what we were looking for. So we headed up trail some more, and we hear the sound again, and we look, and there he is again. So this little bull, he followed us probably for, I don't know, about 900 yards. And, I lifted up my bow and pretended I was going to draw on him just to see, golly. And I think that was one of the stress breakers, was these elk are different, and we can play them a little differently than the skittish elk that we experience on our side of the mountain, because on our side of the mountain, that's kind of unheard of.
I can't imagine what it would have been like to interact with elk in that way and kind of play with them almost and just see how they live versus how we've interacted with elk in regular public land. You can barely even get a glimpse of them before they're over the hill most of the time.
Yeah, that's very true. Something else that we did over there that hasn't been too successful over here, it occasionally works, but we use the Montana decoys. We have a cow's rear end, and then we have a broadside cow with her head turned, and those actually worked really well over there. We were trying to work a really large bull, and all the satellite bulls and the cows would come to that decoy, and that was a ton of fun.
I love using those decoys for antelope hunting, and I would love to try them with elk hunting as well. I'm a strong believer in them some days.
Yeah, you know what was something really fun was last spring, Montana Decoys sent me some turkey decoys to take photos with and share on social media. And I kind of laughed once I got them because they're decoys that you and I already have. And I wanted to tell them, look at this collection we already have. Thank you so much, because I really am a fan of supporting products that I really like. I mean, if somebody sends me something and says, endorse this, I really want to actually like it. I'm not just going to endorse it because they sent it to me. So that was pretty cool to be able to use the turkey decoys when they sent those, and they work really well. But then the elk decoys, and as you said, the antelope ones, they really work really good.
So speaking of decoys, and not saying that these are decoys, but I know you did horseback up there and too many spots. Did the elk have any interaction with your horses?
So yeah, one day we wanted to hunt an area that was a little further away. We would kind of rotate areas because that was something else we were worried about, was we didn't want to push the elk out, which in the end we realized I don't think that really was going to happen. But we had went to another area where we heard some elk bugling when we were traveling through before. And as we're riding across to go tie the horses up, a young bull comes charging out of the woods and right up to Cowboy, who's my horse. Comes charging up to Cowboy, and Cowboy was like, what in the world? And here I am still loaded up trying to get my bow. And, that was pretty hilarious. Other times when we were down hunting, one of the times when we used that Montana decoy, we're trying to get to the big bull, and all the satellite bulls were coming. Well, then the herd ended up, as it got later and later, they went up this draw in the timber, and it was toward where the horses were tied. And once we got back up to the horses after it got dark, we realized that herd of elk had just literally 60 elk went right through the horses. And one of the young horses, who isn't quite as used to it as the old veterans, his bridle was thrown off his saddle, and you could tell he was a little upset and probably nervous about those bulls screaming. But yeah, the horses definitely had some encounters with the elk.
I can't imagine those horses with being around elk that are rutting, and the area you guys are in. I know there's more than just elk hanging out in those mountains. And tell us about the encounter with the big black animal.
So the area where we camped, and actually there are two different draws that we hunted. One draw only. We really didn't there were several areas that we wanted to hunt, but we never even made it because there were so many elk in the one draw. But where we camped, there was actually a huge moose that lived in that draw, and he really likes the black horses that we have. And he, the moose would come toward the black horses, and evidently what we've been told is moose do not have very good eyesight. So seeing the black horse, he probably thought it was a female. He probably thought it was a cow moose, and he was very curious and excited to see this other moose in the area.
I bet he was a little nervous.
On our next episode, something that we'll have to tell you about, I'll have to tell you about some other more exhilarating close encounters, which I've had some on this side of the mountain too, but I'll have to tell you about the pack out as well.
Yes, and we are saving that for the next episode so we can get the full story of just how you harvested this amazing elk.
Yep, so stay tuned, and as Leah said, you can check out our social media outlets on the Mia Anstine Facebook page. A writer, John Sloan, he just did a write-up on women who hunt, and he featured myself and another lady hunter, and there are pictures of the elk there, and you can also check it out. I need to put it on my website. I haven't put it there yet.
Yeah.
So I'll be writing about it. Keep an eye out at miaanstine.com.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. This is a series episode. There will be more to come, so stay tuned and keep an eye out for the next episode.
And thank you guys for following. We hope that you'll subscribe. We hope that you'll give us a positive rating on iTunes. And happy anniversary, Leah. It's our 50th episode.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Thank you all for listening and supporting us.